When you're grieving someone who's still alive, the pain becomes harder to describe because there is no ceremony, no goodbye, no moment where everything ends at once. Instead, you're left with a slow fading, a quiet disappearance, a presence that turns into absence without ever leaving the world. So breathe with me now, slowly, gently. Let your inhale acknowledge the weight of missing someone who still exists somewhere, living a life you no longer have access to. Let your exhale soften the ache of a goodbye that never had a proper beginning. Grieving someone who's still alive is a form of heartbreak that confuses the mind and crushes the heart. You see their pictures, their stories, their life continuing, and yet the version of them you loved is gone. They are alive, but the connection is not. They are breathing, but the relationship is buried. They are out there, but unreachable. And that contradiction breaks something inside you because your heart doesn't know how to mourn a person who still walks the earth. The mind expects closure. The heart expects continuity. And instead, you're left with neither. Breathe again. You did not lose them in a single moment. You lost them in fragments, one unreturned message, one changed tone, one shift in energy, one emotional absence at a time. You started grieving long before you realized it. You felt the distance forming before you could explain it. You sensed the drift before you could name it. By the time they left your life, emotionally or physically, your heart had already begun writing the eulogy for a connection that used to feel alive. People often misunderstand this kind of grief. They ask why you're hurting, why you're crying, why you're struggling to move on when the other person is fine. But they don't understand that the loss is not about death. It's about transformation. You are not grieving the person they are now. You are grieving the person they used to be. The version of them that held you, saw you, chose you, showed up for you. That version no longer exists, even though the human being still does. That is why the pain feels unreal. That is why the grief feels endless. You lost a living memory, not a life. And memories do not get funerals. Take another breath. Deep inhale, soft exhale. Sometimes the hardest part of grieving someone who's alive is that the world expects you to move on quickly. They don't see a tragedy. They don't see an ending worth mourning. They don't see the long nights where you stare at the ceiling trying to understand how someone can be alive and gone at the same time. But you feel it, every day, every night, in the quiet moments when you remember how they used to say your name, how they used to make you laugh, how their presence once made you feel safe. And now there is only silence where connection used to be. You're grieving the possibility of what could have been. You're grieving the future you imagined with them. You're grieving the emotional imprint they left behind. You're grieving the version of yourself who loved them. And grief this deep does not care that the person is still breathing. Grief cares that the bond is gone. Breathe again, slowly. Let your heart rest for a moment. When someone you love becomes a stranger while still living, it teaches you something brutal. People can leave without leaving. They can disappear without going anywhere. They can remove themselves from your emotional life without saying goodbye. And the hardest part? You still wonder if they think of you. You still wonder if they feel even a fraction of what you're going through. You still wonder if the person you loved is hiding somewhere beneath the version they've become. But the truth is painful. The relationship ended even though the person didn't. They changed. You changed. The path changed. And your heart is catching up to a reality your mind has tried so hard to accept. Take another breath. Let your lungs fill with the truth that grieving someone who's alive is not weakness. It is a sign that you loved deeply, sincerely, wholeheartedly. That your emotional bonds were real, not temporary. that you invested a piece of your soul into a connection that once felt safe. And now your heart is mourning that investment because it lost its home. One day, the grief will not feel this heavy. One day, the ache will not feel like a fresh wound. One day, the thought of them will not steal your breath. One day, you will remember the story without collapsing inside it. Until then, you are allowed to feel everything. You are allowed to cry for someone who still exists. You are allowed to miss someone who no longer chooses you. You are allowed to grieve a version of a person who will never return. You are allowed to mourn the connection that shaped you, taught you, broke you, awakened you. Grief is not reserved for death. Grief is reserved for loss. And loss can happen even when a heartbeat continues. Breathe again. Tonight, let yourself rest in this truth. You are not grieving wrong. You are grieving honestly. And honest grief is what carries you toward healing, even when the person you lost is still breathing under the same sky. When you're grieving someone who's still alive, the hardest moments aren't the ones filled with tears. They're the quiet ones. The moments when you open your phone instinctively, hoping for a message you know won't come. The moments when a memory flashes through your mind without warning, pulling your chest into a tight ache. The moments when something good happens and your first impulse is to tell them, before remembering that the version of them who cared is gone. These moments feel like emotional freefall because your heart reaches toward a ghost that still walks in the world. So breathe slowly now. Let your inhale bring softness to the places inside you that still reach for what no longer exists. Let your exhale release the expectation that your grief should make sense to anyone else. Grieving someone alive is confusing because part of you still hopes. A small part, a quiet part, the part that remembers the early days, the laughter, the promises, the way their presence once made your world feel warmer. That part still wonders if they'll come back someday. Still wonders if they think about you too. Still wonders if the change was permanent or just a phase. Hope lingers even when the mind knows the chapter has closed. Hope is the last one to leave, and that's what makes the grief feel endless. Not because you're weak, but because your heart is slow to accept endings it didn't choose. Taking another breath now, deeper this time, let your body remember that grief is not a sign that the story should continue. It is a sign that the story mattered. You're grieving because your love was real. You're grieving because the connection once felt like home. You're grieving because losing someone who's alive leaves no space for closure, no final moment to place your pain into, no ritual that marks the end. With death, there is a ceremony. With endings, there is an event. With emotional loss, there is nothing but silence. Silence that you try to interpret. Silence that feels like abandonment. Silence that stretches across months and makes you question everything you felt. Breathe again. One of the cruelest parts of grieving someone alive is that they keep living a life you're no longer part of. They celebrate things without you. They grow without you. They laugh without you. They change without you. Occasionally, you catch glimpses of their world. Photos, updates, traces that remind you they still exist. But the version of them who held you belongs to a past that no longer has a door. And seeing them continue makes the grief feel invisible, like you're mourning something no one else can see. People expect you to be fine. They don't understand that your heart is navigating a kind of loss that leaves no physical absence, only emotional vacancy. So breathe. Feel the truth settle gently inside your chest. You are not grieving their life. You are grieving your place in it. You are grieving the emotional space you once occupied. You are grieving the version of them who knew your heart, your fears, your softness. That version is gone, even though they remain. Accepting that loss is one of the bravest emotional acts you will ever experience. It takes courage to let go of someone who is still alive. It takes strength to stop checking if they'll return. It takes wisdom to understand that a beating heart does not mean a continuing bond. Grief becomes a bridge you walk alone, and each day you move a little further across it, even if it doesn't feel like progress. One day the weight will lift. One day your chest will stop tightening at the mention of their name. One day you will stop imagining parallel futures where the connection survives. One day you will feel the moment your heart fully understands that the version of them you loved is not coming back. And instead of breaking you, that realization will free you. But until that day arrives, be gentle with yourself. You are allowed to grieve at your own pace. You are allowed to feel a loss that no one else acknowledges. You are allowed to mourn a connection that ended without closure. You are allowed to miss memories that feel like they were stolen. You are allowed to love what was, even while accepting what is. Take one more breath. The person you're grieving is alive, but the story between you no longer is. And tonight, your heart is simply honoring that truth in the only way it knows. Through feeling, through remembering, through slow release. Grief is not a sign of weakness. It is the final expression of love for the version of them who no longer exists in your life. And with each breath, you are learning to say goodbye, not to the person who lives on, but to the chapter their departure forced you to close.